Well, hello, everyone. I'm Russ Danner from CrafterCMS. Welcome to our next session at CrafterCMS Live, Digital Experiences at Momentum, a journey with CrafterCMS and cloud-native technologies. Dami Lola is Manager of Site Reliability Engineering and IT Operations with Momentum, a leading financial services company in South Africa. We welcome questions from the audience at any time, so if you have any questions throughout the presentation, please ask those questions using the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And remember, if you're watching from the lobby, you have to join the Zoom event in order to ask questions. And with that, Dami Lola, take it away.
Thanks a lot, Ross. Welcome, everyone, to this segment. I will be speaking on the digital experience at Momentum, our journey with CrafterCMS and the usage of cloud-native technologies. A little bit of a background about myself and Momentum Group. Like I said, I'm Dami Lola. I work with Momentum Group. Like Ross said, I manage the site reliability engineering and IT operations at one of our divisions called Digital Connect. Momentum Group is one of South Africa's largest life insurers and integrated financial services companies. And we've been making impact for, I think, well over 5 decades now. Our major brands include Momentum, Metropolitan, Gas Risk, and Aries Properties. At Momentum Group, one of the things that we pride ourselves on is on our purpose, which is to help businesses and people like yourself to build and protect their financial dreams. And at the moment, we currently operate, we have our operations in about 9 countries, including South Africa, United Kingdom, India, Botswana, Ghana, Namibia, Lesotho, Mozambique, and Lesotho, Mozambique as well. So feel free to connect with us on any of our channels. We'll be glad to serve you well. Today we'll be talking about our journey, and the agenda that I have today basically is our journey from our legacy architecture that we ran for close to a decade or so, and how we transition from that into CrafterCMS, and some of the deployment options that we took into consideration, and even the movement that we had to make, some of the choices we have to make, transitioning even between the various deployment options in CrafterCMS. I think the previous speaker, for those that attended that great session, will have also kind of got to know about some of the deployment architecture available in CrafterCMS. I'm going to also talk about how we leverage cloud-native architecture and some of our success stories that we've been able to record since we've started to partner with CrafterCMS, and I'm happy to take questions afterwards. So about 10 to 12 years ago, thereabout, we went on a journey to set up things that can enable various of our teams to author content, and also ability to be able to design various microsites, which we really struggled with. Eventually, we had to work with we can call it a monolith architecture. It was good while it lasted, to be honest. It kind of served us well, but as requirements and our business also started to grow, we also started to see some of the pain points started to become more and more visible. Previously, we used what we call a portal environment with web content management, with front end, with Angular, script portlet, back in traditional J2E, as well as Node.js as well. And there were quite a lot of things that we were able to achieve with this. But about 3 years ago, IBM also changed the direction of their businesses. They started to de-invest in the Portal suite. I think then got transferred to another organization completely. So that was also a wake-up call for us to see, coupled with some of the pain points that a lot of our developers and content authors also started to see how best can we transition from here. And we went on a journey to really look at a whole lot of things. And some of the pain points that kind of fast-track our decision included the tightly coupled architecture that we were experiencing on our legacy infrastructure. Many times, while developers are trying to write some script portlets, it's always a battle at times where certain code changes find a way to slip into production because of the tight coupling between what we use to author and what we use to deliver the content that we're trying to serve our viewers clients. Also, when we have probably some challenges, infrastructure challenges with the content authoring, because of the tight coupleness of the infrastructure, it find itself affecting our client, all right? So we're on the journey to look out for something that can help us to deboss that architecture, where the work, no matter how busy or whatever work that is being done on the content authoring side, should not necessarily have a negative impact on the delivery side. Meaning we should be able to shut off our content side, content authoring side, without necessarily affecting our experience, the experience of our users. And that kind of also help us to narrow our requirement. One of the things that we also looked at was how best can we ensure that we leverage, probably something like a Git pipeline to be able to have a more reproducible changes, ability to be able to track changes correctly. It was all difficult with our legacy architecture. Reliability was also a much pain that we experienced. Frequently we couldn't scale. We couldn't scale. Was really difficult to scale because of the nature of the product. And as time goes on, we started also to pick up increase in our data center as well in terms of costing. So we look at all of this and coupled with the direction that our previous vendor was also going to see how best we can fast track the transition from the legacy infrastructure into something a little more modern that can kind of suit our current and future needs as well. And that led us to our transitioning into CrafterCMS, all right? One of the things that really got our attention is the loosely coupled architecture from what you will have used to author your content versus what you use to deliver those content. So the ability to be able to divorce the studio and the engine was a game changer for us. And coupled with the fact that changes are properly tracked via Git, that was a game changing for us because that kind of aligned very well with our strategies. And ability also to be able to easily scale, all right, our delivery environment, which in the previous architecture, it was because of the tight coupleness, we had to create a fat infrastructure. So we couldn't scale successfully vertically. We had to scale, we couldn't scale horizontally, rather, we had to scale vertically, all right? When we had increased load or certain needs, all right? And that was one of the things that we're able to now start to see that, okay, with the adaptation of CrafterCMS, we might be able to easily do that. And the fluence of DexSecOps integration was also, something quite admirable as well. That kind of led us into making a decision to see how best we can leverage this new platform to achieve our desired goal. And like I mentioned in the previous session, I think the Enquire team talked about deployment model. Just to spend a little more time there. We considered two options available from CrafterCMS, either to go SaaS or to go self-manage. And there were a whole lot of consideration that we had to take into our analysis. And based on those requirements, we then make an informed decision. And one of which was because of our main internal security requirement and some of the cost optimization that we're trying to do at the time of adaptation, it was a clear choice that we will have to, for now, go the self-hosted route to be able to meet those requirements. And then we're then left with, do we do AMI or do we do containerization? At the time when we started, we were not, our comfort level with the containerization was not that great. So we opted for the AMI model because that was an easy transition from where we're coming from into that space. So that kind of paved that way, that path for us. The learning curve for a lot of our developers and SRE team was not that much because they're kind of a little bit familiar with some of the tooling. And then it kind of paved way to be able to transition and started to migrate some of the project over. We ran that for about 2.5 to 3 years. And then since last year, we transitioned into the container, and that's what we have been running at the moment. So in moving from AMI model, which is the traditional, like for those that probably deploy CrafterCMS on AWS infrastructure, could have been maybe probably an institute AMI machines. One of the challenges that we saw that also, kind of paved the way into transition into the containerized deployment model was version upgrade. I heard the Ancora team also talking about the need to coordinate upgrade across various teams. I think it was one of the challenges that we faced with the adaptation of the AMI model was a real struggle for us. And then it was also almost like a launching wake-up call that kind of drove us into the containerized deployment option. Scalability there as well, even though it was possible, but because of the nature of the setup, it became a little bit difficult, especially on the delivery side, right? Because we could not leverage. Remember, we have to create almost like a synchronization between the authoring and the delivery node, so that all your processor can also be able to forward content accordingly to the delivery node. There was a little bit of a struggle there, at least for us in our own implementation. Typical virtual machine overheads also came into play. And for each of the sites that we created, we had to also create dedicated AWS secret to be able to expose those content to the delivery. So, and then we have to look at, okay, how best to be able to rotate those secrets. It was something that we also have to manage. And looking at the containerized deployment option, we saw a much more cleaner, effective approach to that will lessen that kind of admin exercise. So one of the merit that we saw moving to the containerized deployment included horizontal scalability, all right? It made it much easier for us, almost like a non-event for us now. It's part of architecture based on certain metrics. It's easier for us to quickly scale, all right? It's all automated. It's part of the our infrastructure as code. And then it's then easier also to leverage a popular orchestration platform like Kubernetes, which lends itself to automatic failure detection and recovery. And these are some of the things that we have to do a whole lot of DIY and handcrafting in the previous legacy architecture, as well as when we're on the AMI model. At the moment now, because of the decoupled infrastructure, we were also able to do a proper, what we call internal cost allocation within our various business units without having to think about it. All right. With the initial bit, with the AMI model, because everything is running on the same AMI, it became difficult to be able to allocate costs correctly. But with the containerized option where infrastructure kind of isolated at the site level. Each of the site has their own mini, S3 bucket or CloudFront distribution, allocating cost that support or that sponsor that specific site became much easier. All right. And that leads me to the cloud native architecture aspect of our deployment. As you can see there, what we have set up is a completely loosely coupled architecture there. We've got, I heard somebody, asking in the previous session about, how do you make use of database to persist certain sessions or started configuration. So CrafterCMS, containerized deployment model do support that, where some of your configuration are stored at the database level, and that also lends itself to easy recoverability. All right. So if you leverage, proper business continuity plans or disaster recovery plans, you can have that, on automatic snapshot being created for you, so that then even if any of your authoring node or whatever you got out of scope, you can easily recover your environment from a snapshot. And thanks to that, that kind of helps us a lot. So there are some metadata that are persisted at the RDS level over here. All right, and we've got the EBS volume also that also persists certain information regarding the authoring. Also, we use some of the cloud native processing in AWS to ensure that those volumes are automatically backed up, and that we can easily recover them as well. And then we have an ELB in front of our ESG, in front of our ASG that exposes our authoring node, and we've kind of exposed that through with 53 for easy access internally. This was designed to, only to be used within the internal system, meaning this is not visible outside and should not have been. Unlike what we had before, like I said, because of the tight, coupled architecture, there was almost no way to be able to distinguish that. Now we've got an opportunity to because authoring is essentially an internal affair where your content authors or developers actually try to work. It has no business of being exposed externally outside of your networks. And with the diverse nature of the authoring and the delivery node, and that kind of being made possible over here. Next is the delivery node, quite similar to what we saw just now on the authoring side of things. With the delivery node, we have we have horizontal port scaler configured on the delivery node, such that depending on the type of cloud alert that we get, probably if we have a cloud formation, a CloudWatch alert, we then immediately respond based on that as well. So if the compute reaches certain, let's for example now during maybe Black Friday or certain communication that went out to some of our users, and then we've got a spike, all right? We don't have to think about it. There is a horizontal port scaler automatically just spin up a new delivery node for us to be able to accommodate more load, all right? And as the case increases, of course, we have a limit to it, but that shows you the power of scalability within the CrafterCMS infrastructure. And I'm putting the whole thing together. This is exactly how it looks like. As you can see, what we do here, I'm just going to walk you through exactly how the process works. So a typical user that's an external user, will access the delivery node via Cloudflare. The typical content creator or developer writing a certain script will access the authoring via Route 3 and internal to our networks. All right. And we've got a little bit of a cloud front over here that exposes each of the sites, right? I think one of the speakers in the previous session also mentioned about, ensuring that you have secure headers to make it easier for CrafterCMS to be able to recognize what site you're trying to access. So there is that, interaction between CloudFront and Cloudflare over here, and that makes it possible to be able to have, based on the secure header that is injected into the site, and CloudFront is able to pass that through to the delivery node to be able to know exactly what site to be able to render. Right? And that what that the possibility of that is then we can have a dedicated URL for that specific site, which I'm going to show you an example in the next few minutes. To also enable, I mentioned something about internal cost allocation earlier on. We have a transformation Lambda functions that we have embedded for each of the sites created. And what that does is to be able to check certain metadata and then automatically inject certain tags to make it easier for us to be able to know what business unit to allocate what cost to for that specific site. So for whatever infrastructure that gets provision for a specific site, the transformation Lambda function automatically just do the background work to automatically inject certain predefined tags to those. Of course, based on we use like a pattern in the creation of the site, and based on that pattern is able to extract relevant information to be able to know how best to distribute the cost within our own organization. Okay, I think I mentioned this earlier on, where the metadata is stored, and that's on the RDS side. And on over here, the horizontal post scaler. So as the load increases, as you can see here, the authoring and the delivery node are completely separate, all right? Via, couple of processors, whatever information that is stored, all right, aka your site metadata, get automatically published, all right, into the delivery node, all right, using either gate processor, whatever processor that I might have set up. We use gate processor, so whatever changes get persisted by the content authors or developers, and that gets automatically synced and published by the gate processor into the delivery node. Like I mentioned earlier, even if the authoring node is completely whacked, we are still able to serve our clients really, really effectively. All right. We use GitLab to author most of our content, and that goes straight into the EBS storage, persistence, and also for easy recoverability. From the real client out there, what they will typically do is to access a specific or defined site by Cloudflare, which proxy the request into our CloudFront distribution. And then based on what has been accessed, either static asset or certain APIs, it then direct the traffic accordingly. If it's a static asset, kind of just retrieve that from the S3 bucket. If not, then it directs the traffic to the delivery node to actually be able to retrieve that directly from the delivery node. All right, we've got some few things that we've also been able to record from here in terms of successes. We've got better user experience with a lot of our users now, and I'm going to show you some few stats. It's now easier for a lot of our content authors, especially even our developers, to be able to release a bit faster than what we used to experience while on the legacy architecture. We also have improved scalability now, like I demonstrated just now, in that architecture. And a lot of our clients are actually happy because the experience with our site that is now powered by CrafterCMS is much more fluid compared to what we had before, right? Which is a good thing. On one of our recent sites that we migrated a couple of weeks ago, actually, from the traditional architecture, because we're doing this more like in stages. We started like 3 years ago. We're just migrating each of the site one after the other. That was one of our major sites that we migrated a couple of weeks ago. And this is how our web vitals actually look like. On a monthly basis, we have all sort of errors, close to about 2.2 million. And most of the sessions that have errors within that site is about 44%. All right. Of course, some of these are not necessarily noticeable by the users, but it definitely hurt performance on that side. Definitely hurt performance. And was one of the things that we are hoping, and of course, seeing the success of CrafterCMS on the other static site but that we have created over the years, we were definitely sure that we will be able to get a huge success with this. And you know, this is how things are looking up without doing anything. All right, without doing anything, just almost like a lift and shift, just changing the platform. We're able to go monthly average from 2.2 million errors to 436,000, from 44% error rate to 18.8% error rate. This is already a success story. And that also then give confidence to a lot of our team that manages this specific site to be able to go back and see how best they can then optimize and then ensure that those other errors are further reduced than what we currently have. This is huge. This is really, really massive. Like I mentioned, we've got faster releases now. I think, if I'm not mistaken, we've been able to roll out more than 10 different sites with CrafterCMS now. One of which is Velocity Club. Velocity Club is, we use that for our financial advisors, for planning with various, to provide advice and planning with various clients. Smooth, experience there, and the feedback has been amazing. Amazing. Another site that we have is Equilibrium. That helps to present financial outcomes. That's also used by one of our advisors. I'm advising house as well. Good experience there as well. The feedback has been amazing since launch. And our main website, which is Momentum Group, is also actually powered by CrafterCMS. All right. And the impact is, tells it all. All right. In one of our flagship sites also the same thing as well. When we're actually migrating Momentum Group main site to CrafterCMS, the projected timeline was some few months, and thanks to CrafterCMS, we're able to cut that almost in half. All right, again, because of the way the technology has lent itself. The developers always happy to work with the tooling. Content authors no longer have to fight with the developers because of that proper separation of concerns, right? So the partnership between our content authors, our developers, our DevSecOps teams has been amazing. Especially coming from where we were before with our legacy architecture. Seeing this actually, it kind of brings joy and also satisfaction, not just to us, but of course to our users, clients, and advisors out there as well. One of our flagship sites is Momentum, which is also powered by CrafterCMS also. Mostly the pre-login part, powered by Crafter. The transitioning here was extremely smooth. I remember when some of the business executives wanted to understand when because we had planned it out and then we kicked it off at a particular time. And because they were not seeing much glitches on the site, they were trying to find out, as the site, migration started, as it happened. And we told them we're, certain percentage done already. because of the fluidity and the way CrafterCMS lends itself. It's really, really amazing. They couldn't believe it. They really, really couldn't believe it. In conclusion, so that I can be able to have time with questions, just to do a quick of a wrap. We've discussed about our journey from legacy architecture into what we now have, and some of the pains that we experienced with the legacy architecture, which included bloated architecture, tightly coupled stuff, problem with scalability and costs and the likes. We then also spoke about how we transitioned into CrafterCMS, consideration that we took into play, and also the deployment option that we considered as well, and how we migrated from our initial deployment option, which was AMI, into a more modern containerized deployment option. Some of this, challenges that we had with AMI, and how our containerized deployment options is now able to help us solve some of those problems. All right. I think if I can recall that the upgrade was one that was really, really, a big deal there. And moving to containerized deployment option, I mean, within a month, we've been able to do several upgrades, and it's really amazing. While we were on AMI model, we had to almost like take permission and ask for forgiveness because of certain issue that we might encounter. But with the containerized deployment options, that is no longer the case. We also spoke about how we leverage cloud native architecture, utilizing Kubernetes environment. We deployed our stuff on AWS, how best we're able to leverage cloud native functionality within AWS platform. And some of the recorded success stories as well that we've had in terms of better user experience and faster releases and the likes. And that will be me for today. I'm definitely happy to take questions for the next 15 to 20 minutes.
Thanks, Damilola. We're gonna go ahead and take some questions now. We do have quite a bit of time, so we're gonna work through these questions, and if we have time remaining at the end, we'll actually answer some questions from the previous session. Okay. To start off, this is what you were just talking about there at the end. I see a question here. What are the advantages of CrafterCMS while running in Kubernetes versus an AMI deployment?
Great question. So I think with Kubernetes, the main thing that you would gain is ease of scalability, right? You don't have to, with AMI model, that there's a lot of DIY that will be required to get scalability to work. And it's also a bit difficult to leverage cloud native processes like auto scaling group as an example. And the reason is because when you configure trust between authoring and delivery node, in most of the cases, you have to use IPs and whatnot. So if, for example, now your AMI, gets to be rebounced, or you have to create a new one, for example, now it makes it a little bit difficult to be able to scale horizontally. With Kubernetes, is something that just happened out of the box, all right? With horizontal port scaler, you can be able to get that done, quite easily. The other benefit that we have seen so far is the upgrade. Like I said, for us, with AMI model, we had some few pains with version upgrades, and that has not been the case with Kubernetes and containerized platform because of the way that architecture is actually set up. And also the cost aspect of things. It's much lightweight. We can scale more horizontally rather than vertically. So the more site we create, the more load we have, we don't have to scale vertically. We can easily scale horizontally, which is a really, really important thing for us.
Awesome. We have another question. Well, and here, how easy is it to scale? Can you tell us a little bit about what that process is like and how easy it is under this model?
Yeah, I can quickly probably just go back to that slide where I spoke about it. So with Kubernetes has a native properties horizontal port scaler that can easily be configured based on certain metrics, either compute metrics or memory metrics, to say if you reach a certain threshold, automatically spin off a new delivery node, all right? And because of that, it's not something that you have to always, it's very proactive before your delivery node get too much heat. Let's say, for example, if you're trying to service a customer on a Black Friday or after a certain event has happened, for example, that alone, that singular configuration alone can easily help you. And as soon as the load comes down, the horizontal port scaler also automatically then take out the additional node that has been created for you. You don't have to go back there and start to figuring things out and doing a whole lot of DIY stuff. So you can easily scale in and out much fluidly using the underlying Kubernetes process itself.
Great. We have another one here. It's interesting. I mean, as soon as infrastructure comes up, cost comes up, right? So there's a question here. Has there been a significant cost difference between the previous platform and usage of CrafterCMS in the K8's environment?
Yeah, that's also a good question. So I think there's two things there. First is the ability to be able to isolate cost per site. We couldn't even determine what was costing us more. Was it this site or that site? All right. With CrafterCMS, especially the Kubernetes containerized platform deployment model, we are able to create small piece, all right, that we can then deploy the site into. So for example, now a particular site will have a platform distribution, will also have an S3 bucket, all right? The cost of that is really, really minimal, all right? And that helps us to be able to know this is actually what this specific site actually costs in running. Of course, other than what the platform itself, the delivery or the authoring node actually cost us. And the more we then increase, like we are currently doing now, the numbers of sites that we rolled out, because most of the work is actually it's not on the delivery node, all right? It's completely federated. Platform is taking the heat, S3 bucket is taking the heat, not the delivery node itself. And that means that the need to scale vertically, either the authoring node and the delivery node is almost, completely far-fetched, all right? Compared to our legacy infrastructure, where the more, we'll call it virtual host or virtual portal, the more virtual portal you create, the more load you actually put on the system. And that will force you to actually scale vertically, increasing your cost. All right. So with this, we can see that very clearly, that the cost of implementation and the running of our site now is much more reduced compared to where we're coming from. And not only that, ability to also be able to know how much this specific site is actually costing me. We couldn't do that before. Now we are able to do so.
Thank you. That's great. There's a question here. It's a sort of a specific question about the cloud, like Cloudflare in front of CloudFront. Can you talk a little bit more to the?
Yeah, no, interesting question. Interesting question. Yeah, so as you know, both of them can play CDN role, but Cloudflare is not CDN. It has CDN functionality embedded inside of it. So we use Cloudflare is actually a security requirement for all of our public-facing site to have all of us public-facing services to sit behind Cloudflare. So we don't use Cloudflare as a CDN in that matter. The CDN part is played by CloudFront. The Cloudflare is essentially for DNS. All right. I mean, as you know, if you want to, let's say, for example, now, you have a dedicated site, like some of the one that I mentioned earlier on, you will really want to go to a specific dedicated site, all right? www.xyz.com as an example, all right? You can have your DNS resolution happening on the Cloudflare side and then, getting advantage of all the security features and also our security alignment as well. And then the CDN part is then delegated to CDN, to CloudFront. So that's actually the mix between Cloudflare, majorly about security requirement for our organization, but it does not do CDN as regards CrafterCMS. That is completely delegated to CloudFront.
Okay, great. It's great detail. And I think just for everybody watching, if you have a follow-up, just mention in your question that it's a follow-up and kind of reference the question that we talked about before, and we'll be happy to take that. You did talk about the type, like the sites that you're running. Could you tell us a little bit more about the types of integrations, things that impact performance? Of course, when we're talking about infrastructure, everybody's interested in like, well, how does this perform? How does it scale? So what kinds of things are going on the back ends of those sites that are integrations and so on that impact performance, and you're taking advantage of CrafterCMS to help with?
Yeah, so like the one that we released recently, or that we migrated recently, is one of our main clients-facing site where users that we sell insurance product to actually visit to check their portfolios and then buy products from us, all right? Recently, I think it was around last year, we had what we call two-pot system. Was a change in our retirement. It was a government policy here in South Africa to change how retirement annuity is actually accessed, all right? We're one of the first insurance organization in South Africa to actually go with that live. And we saw a whole lot of hit with that. Unfortunately, at that time, we were using the legacy infrastructure. Now, something happened recently as well, a little bit similar, where we rolled out, something new, and that's, migrating from the old into the new. The kind of pressure that we faced, all right, the spike that we faced, because of the loosely coupled architecture, all right, of CrafterCMS, especially leveraging the containerized model. Remember, the authoring, let me start with that, and the delivery are completely divorced from one another. Not divorced completely, but they are loosely coupled, all right? And that means the work being done by our content authors and developer has almost zero effect in terms of performance on the delivery node. Now, coming to the delivery node, where we had a whole lot of the hits, all right? Again, because of the loose architecture being employed there, we have all of our assets in H3 buckets as an example. We've got a CDN CloudFront that help us to cache some of the frequently accessed resources to make it a little bit faster, all right? And the auto-scaling feature that we have enabled within the delivery node helped us to ensure that immediately as those loads started to increase, additional delivery node was automatically provisioned without us having to do nothing, all right? Just based on the configuration. The horizontal port scaler automatically scale out to be able to add additional pod into the space to be able to accommodate those loads. And as soon as those traffic kind of went down, and then everything back to normal. So that was more or less how the performance was handled recently with those changes.
Okay. Well, it looks like we have about 5 more minutes. We got plenty of questions here.
Okay. Let's see
So
how much we can move faster.
no, that's fine. I think you're doing great. Let's look at this one here. That you work at a bank and security is a major topic. Can you talk a bit more about how you think about and implement DevSecOps with CrafterCMS?
All right, so great question. So one of the things that we enjoyed greatly in, especially in Craft of version 4, is ability to be able to have proper ACLs, all right, per site. So and we follow that religiously, where um, for each of the site we create as part of our pipeline, we create default roles for that specific site. So the access to the specific site, even for the content authors, is completely well managed. All right. So starting from there, and access to the Crafter platform does not automatically give you access to the entire site on Crafter. All right, because of that singular ACLs process. So we have that well defined. And also, what I mentioned earlier on was with the AMI model, we had to have quite a lot of AWS because of the shared numbers of sites that we have on Crafter. We have to create a number of AWS secrets, right? And with the current containerized deployment model, 0. All right, not needed because everything is role-based. All right, so that further increase our security posture. First, right from the studio, which is the authoring node, access is properly managed. You only get access to whatever site that you and what level as well. All right, either admin access or publishing access or authoring access or whatever you. And then straight up to the delivery, all right? And the essence of having Cloudflare in front of CloudFront is also part of the security architecture as well, to ensure that even for the delivery node, that is properly gated, all right? APIs are not exposed by the delivery node, so nobody can access that. So we will have some guardrails that we kind of put in place to help us ensure that bad actors do not take undue advantage of the system.
Hey, Russ, I'm going to jump in here. Hey, everybody, Mike here again. Thanks, Dami. We're going to give you a break here in answering some questions. We got a couple questions I think are better suited. I'm going to bring Sumer Jabri, our CTO, up to the stage here to address a couple other questions here. Dami, if you want to chime in, you feel free. So this is one from the previous session we weren't able to get to. Is it possible to export, delete, and re-import a CMS project? Is it possible to manage hundreds of CMS projects within one system? And what's the largest number of projects on one system to date?
Okay, so 3 different questions. Let's start with the export and re-import. So for those of you who know, Crafter manages projects in Git repositories. Essentially, every site or every project is an individual Git repository. And so an export would be actually just pushing that Git repository up to, say, GitHub or GitLab or Bitbucket or whatever your favorite Git system, or even just copy it or pull it somewhere. Once you have that Git repository, you can actually instantiate a new site and say, I'm going to be creating a site from that quote unquote export, which is a Git repo. And then that site will be recreated. You can obviously then delete the old if you so choose. But the idea that you can instantiate as many sites as you want or clone them. So in version 5, actually, we support a direct API call that says, or even in version 4, we support the direct API call that says clone. And when you say clone, it'll take a site and make a copy of it. Whether you push it up or you clone it, that replicates it. The only thing, a caveat here, is that the workflow states, the user roles, the interactions of the authors will not carry over, because that's the database state of that Git repository, what the activities were on the Git repository. But the content itself can be pushed up and then pulled down into a new site. I hope that answers the question. I think the second question you asked was managing, like scaling, like large amounts of sites. Like everything else, when you talk about scale, it's like what is a site? You want to scale to hundreds of sites. Well, how big are these? If it's let's assume if it's a site that has a million objects and you want to create 100 of those, that's 100 million objects in one system, which probably implies that you should probably shard. And Crafter supports sharding beautifully. But let's break this down a little bit. To scale CrafterCMS, there are always two considerations. There's the authoring side and there's the delivery side. The delivery side is, like Dami was mentioning, is where your end users come in to consume the content. And to scale that to hundreds of sites is pretty simple. There is no hard limit in the system. It doesn't, the Crafter engine, which is the primary delivery system, and Crafter deployer, which is the deployment and indexing system, and Open Search, which is the search engine, all three of them have no hard limits. And if you scale them individually correctly, they'll accommodate whatever you want. The little caveats here are, in Crafter engine, if it's backed by disk, then local disk retrieval to keep the least recently used or most recently used cache in RAM as it delivers content is pretty quick, because disk is very fast. And it will keep, Crafter engine knows how to manage its own memory, and it will keep the working set in RAM as it delivers content extremely quickly. However, you can also back Crafter engine by S3. And you back it by S3, that's a more expensive call. And Crafter engine will do a good job at pre-warming its cache and prefetching information, but that costs RAM. So if you're using Crafter engine backed by S3, and then you start adding more and more sites that are fundamentally different, then there's a limit of RAM. How much RAM are you going to give it to be able to manage all those site contexts simultaneously? So if backed by disk, your limits of concurrent sites is much, much larger. If you're backing by S3 and your sites are small, then again, it's pretty large. But if your sites are very large and your working set is large and you're backed by S3, then you got to vertically scale up engine in order to accommodate that memory needs, or just shard it. Again, engine doesn't care. You can have a set of engines here that deliver these sites, a set of engines there that deliver these other sites. It doesn't care. So that's how to scale engine on the delivery side. On the deployer side, deployer is sitting there constantly looking for changes by authors. So if you have authors that are very active, content that's highly textual and needs to be indexed, well, you need to scale the deployer tier pretty well so that it can constantly keep these indexes up to date. So it's going to go out to the Git repository, pull down the changes, perform the indexing, update the open search indexes, update the S3 bucket or disk of Crafter engine, and validate the caches and do all that stuff. And deployer can become a bottleneck unless you have a big enough tier or vertically scale the deployer to accommodate your needs. The more sites you have, the more threads you'll need to give deployer so it can go, pull all that stuff. And again, that can be sharded. And lastly is your open search cluster. So Crafter integrates deeply with OpenSearch, uses it from a number of tasks, and that has to be scaled to accommodate the number of indexes needed for the sites. Now, there will be a different set of indexes per site, but again, that cluster has to be scaled to accommodate both the number of indexes, the maintenance jobs that it needs, and then the size. So going back to how big are these individual sites.
But it sounds, so the answer is it possible to manage hundreds? The answer is yes. Technical factors you've kind of detailed here.
That's exactly right.
And also I think it's very important. We always talk about Crafter engine. There's no database, right? We use Git for this content repository on the CMS authoring side. On the delivery side, there's no database. So you read from disk. We have in memory, and it scales horizontally and vertically, but horizontally because it's stateless, serverless in effect.
It is stateless, serverless, and it doesn't share anything. The engine nodes that are running do not communicate amongst each other. So they work completely independently, which is exactly to Dami's point earlier. when he said, well, load comes up and then EKS will just keep spinning up more nodes in the scale group, and then those will readily pick up traffic and continue because they don't need to coordinate amongst themselves. They're completely independent. That also helps with that global deployment idea where different nodes of engine can run in different geographies, but they're not co-communicating. They're serving local constituencies, and that makes for that, that gives you that ability to scale that way.
Okay, we got 2 more minutes. That the last question of this and leading into another open question in this session. So what's the largest number of projects? This other question is it possible to run 350 sites in hybrid mode? I'm not sure what hybrid mode is. And at least 200 editors within Crafter. What performance challenges exist? 350 sites, 200 authors/editors.
So
2 minutes to address that.
I'll try to be really quick.
And then we can also address more of this in the roundtable that we have later today.
I think the engineering roundtable will give us an opportunity to delve more deeply, but at a high level, we've had customers approaching 2,000 authors in Crafter Studio making constant changes. These are larger organizations, obviously. The question then is, how much concurrency do you see in that system? How concurrent are those 200 authors that you mentioned? Are they all constantly reading and writing? How much read to write ratios? These details matter. Ultimately, you scale your system up to the point at which point you can always shard. So you can shard different use cases. And because these are Git repos, they can always collaborate, like Tony mentioned in the previous presentation, even across shards. In terms of the number of sites and how many we've seen things upwards of 100 sites within a single installation. Usually people between 50 and 100, they end up sharding. Now, it depends how big these sites are. Some sites have a million objects, and therefore you probably want to shard sooner. Some sites are really microsites and mini sites serving so many constituencies. For those, we've seen people talk about 700 little microsites, and those, again, they're small. It's what is a site? How big is it in terms of concurrency? How concurrent are you? How many reads versus writes?
Great. All right, Russ, back over to you.
Yeah, well, I just want to thank Damilola. It was a great presentation. Your questions, your answers to questions were great.